Good morning on this thought-provoking Thursday. I'm going to talk a little bit about a code or a creed and why you should have one, and maybe give you some ideas how you can formulate yours, modify yours, or just affirm that yours is working for you. Welcome to Coffee with Alain. My coffee cup inspired today's topic. A man's got to have a code, a creed to live by. It's a saying here by John Wayne on one of my John Wayne mugs. So I really like that. A man's got to have a code, a creed to live by. I believe that's true. I have one. Mine's been sort of shaped and modified as I go through the years, which is natural. It's going to be different if you're young and single than if you're older with family obligations and so forth, or at least it should be. But some of the basic tenets from way back when I was young and single are still there. And I've sort of formed my code or creed more on the military martial aspects. Being a lifelong martial artist, starting heck with grade school when I was Bruce Tegner and Fred Neff books, then actually getting to train with an instructor when I got into high school and beyond, and still training and teaching today, being in the military, studying military manuals, military figures throughout history. My code and creed has been shaped by those figures and those influences. Honor and integrity, courage being some basic tenets that fall within all warriorship and warrior cultures. You find those throughout the different warrior cultures, and those have helped modify my creed or code, things that I live by. I can't tell you what you should live by. I can give suggestions. I can share stuff that I do. I can share things from other warriors, other philosophers, other codes, but you really have to develop a code that works for you, your creed, that fits your situation, your temperament, your personality. Some people might call it a mission statement, which is very similar. A personal mission statement is similar to a code or a creed. Although a code or creed doesn't necessarily have to have something that you're going toward in the future. It's those basic tenets and principles that you live by that help you succeed and go toward those goals in the future. I'm going to say good morning to Dixon. Dixon says, I admire your sheepdog mentality. Thank you, Dixon. And Dixon's been a lifelong martial artist as well, so he understands. And those of us that have been military or law enforcement, martial arts for many years, and not just, a couple times a week as a hobby, but into it to where we're at levels where we're teaching others and so forth. All of us sort of have that sheepdog mentality, the protective nature, the warrior and the protective thing inside us. And so we often look to other warriors, warrior cultures, for influence on how to be better and live better. At least I sure have. I mean, the way of the peaceful warrior. I read that the first time back in the 80s when it first came out. I've read it several times since. I've read the graphic novel. I've watched the movie. I read the revised editions. I read the explanation. I read the sequels. I've read everything Dan Millman's put out. Those have all shaped me. And while Dan Millman was not military, he was a martial artist and an athlete. And so he has some of that same stuff. And so that has shaped me. But then I look toward Patton, one of my favorite historical military figures. General Patton, learned and incorporated things from him into my personal creed and code. I look back toward the samurai. I've read tons about the samurai. There's a lot of literature out there, a lot of old texts that have been translated into English. Those have influenced my code and creed. The art of war, for Sun Tzu from China, has influenced it. The Miyamoto's Musashi, probably the most famous of the Japanese works that I've read, the Book of Five Rings, but there are a lot of other Japanese, the Hagakure and so forth, that have influenced. There's not as many historical Korean things in English from warriors, but there are some, and things written about Yi Sun-shin, one of my favorite Korean historical military figures, Admiral E, been influenced by him and some of the writings, because he left a journal, and the journal you can get in English. I have a copy back here. And so some of those things, those have influenced me. And all of those help shape my code or my creed and ways to live. Walt Disney, not a warrior, not anything that you would think of as far as military or law enforcement or anything like that, but his philosophy and his beliefs have helped shape my creed. And an interesting thing, if you don't know about Walt, when his brother went off to the war, he was too young. He tried. So he lied about his age, and he went over there and was with the Red Cross. And so he was over in Europe during the war, helping and serving. They wouldn't let him be in the military, but he lied and got into the Red Cross and was over there helping and serving in that capacity before he came back and, started on with the empire that he started and is humongous today. So it wasn't that he was afraid to serve or he didn't want to serve. He did everything he could to serve. And his brother, was in the military. So all of these kind of figures have shaped my code and creed. Your goal, your assignment, what you need to do is develop your own. Beg, borrow, steal from things that are out there. Read, listen, watch, and develop a code, a creed that will help guide you. And it should be positive traits such as honor, honesty, which are related. Courage, I think, is so important. We need to be courageous not only as warriors, but courageous for everything in life. So courage is in there. Okay. Integrity. Live by what you say. That's a common trait spouted by martial artists. Unfortunately, there's some that are out there screaming integrity the loudest that have absolutely none. I could give you names, but I'm going to be nice and not. But you need to develop the code and the creed that works for you, that will help guide your life in a productive, positive manner. Because when tough decisions come up, which they come up all the time, if you don't have those solid foundational principles that you live by, it's going to be harder to make those decisions, and you may make the wrong decisions. If you have solid bedrock of principles, that solid, strong foundation, when those difficulties come up, you can easily decide what the right thing to do is. And that's an important reason to have that. So your assignment, if you have a creed, if you have thought about this before and you have a code, revisit it. Make sure you're living by it. Modify it if it needs modification to fit your life better as your life is right now. And don't modify it to make it lax, like, oh, it's too tough. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if you have a different situation where you need to incorporate something, but don't modify it to make it easy, saying, oh, my code and creed is too easy. No, we're not going to modify it to make it easier. We're just going to modify it to make sure it fits our certain circumstances with our friends and family and work and what we're doing. So do that if you have a code or creed. If you don't have one, if you have never thought about this before, carve out some time, set some time aside where you can actually think about this and start developing one. It won't happen like that. You'll want to actually put some thought into it. Maybe do some reading, maybe some listening, some watching of what some of the great philosophers and people of our throughout the centuries have provided, and make your code and creed based on some of those really solid, time proven principles. And you'll have something that can guide you for the rest of your life and help your life be more productive, more positive, more successful. So go out, make it a thought-provoking Thursday, and we'll see you tomorrow.